I never thought I'd be homeless at 17. Rain soaked through my clothes as I stared at the locked door. My foster mother had just kicked me out for discovering a terrible secret, leaving me with nothing but a backpack and my $43, and I didn't know what to do next. A text buzzed in from Jake. "I'm sorry." Sorry? Sorry wouldn't give me shelter or stop the cold seeping through my jacket. Sorry means nothing when you have nowhere to go. Things had to get better fast, 'cause they couldn't get any worse for me. I'd met Jake during my junior year when I transferred to Lincoln High after my dad's job moved us across the country. I was 16 and painfully shy. I especially dreaded being the new girl all over again. I still remember my first day in the new school, me clutching my schedule in sweaty hands, trying to decipher the building numbers while students streamed past in tight-knit groups. "You look completely lost," a voice had said, and there was Jake. He was tall, with kind eyes and a crooked smile that made my heart skip. "I'm Jake. Do you need some help?" That simple act of kindness bloomed into something more. Jake was the first person who made me feel like I belonged. My parents noticed the change in me. Mom would tease me gently when Jake called, and Dad insisted on meeting him before allowing us to go to the spring dance together. "I like that young man," Dad had told me later that night. "He looks you in the eye when he speaks. That shows he's a man of character." I only wish that was true. Time would tell. 2 weeks later, they were gone. It happened on a Friday evening. At 9:22 p.m., the doorbell rang. 2 police officers stood on our porch, their faces solemn. I knew before they spoke. They explained it clinically, as if that might somehow soften the blow. A tractor trailer had jackknifed on Highway 16 during the storm, crossing the median. My parents' car had no chance. Jake called every funeral home in town until he found one that could accommodate us quickly. His mother, Diane, swooped in with a take-charge efficiency, orchestrating the flowers, the service, and the reception afterward at her house. "You poor thing," her friends murmured. "What happens now?" someone asked. But she wasn't speaking to me, but talking about me, speaking as if I weren't standing right there, a few feet away. "She has no family living nearby," another voice replied. "Her aunt's overseas, I think." "She'll go into foster care, probably," a third voice whispered. Her words sent a chill through me despite the stuffy warmth of the crowded room. Was this how my future would be decided, I wondered? By anonymous people in offices who'd never met me, who didn't know me? That's when Diane appeared at my side, her arm sliding around my shoulders. "You can stay with us until we figure things out," she'd said. I was too numb to question what figuring things out meant, too desperate for any port in the storm of my grief. I just nodded gratefully, leaning into her side like a drowning person clinging to a life raft, never suspecting the raft might be attached to an anchor. What it meant was that I became Diane's personal assistant, housekeeper, and emotional punching bag. Nothing I did was ever good enough. The bathrooms were never clean enough. She'd say, "I can still see water spots on the mirror, Adele." Dinner was never ready on time. "We eat at 6 in this house, not 6:05. I was taking up too much space in their lives. My bedroom was the smallest in their 4-bedroom colonial. It was a converted office with barely enough space for a twin bed and a dresser. The walls were still lined with Diane's bookshelves, filled with self-help books about embracing abundance and manifesting wealth. She never seemed to actually read them. The room smelled perpetually of the artificial lavender air freshener she insisted on spraying daily. She claimed my teenage odors were overwhelming. "Remember, Adele, you're here because we're generous," she'd remind me at least twice a week. That was usually while I was elbow-deep in dishwater or scrubbing the kitchen floor. Not everyone would take in a stray. A stray. That's all I was to her, worthless and only worthy of scraps. The word stung every time, but I swallowed my pride. Where else could I go? My mom's sister lived overseas with her military husband. My dad had been an only child whose parents had passed years ago. The alternative was foster care. The horror stories I'd heard about that made Diane's house seem like a palace in comparison. I tried so hard to be grateful. I cleaned the house daily, cooked meals, and did the laundry, all while maintaining straight A's and working weekends at a local cafe. There I served bottomless coffee to truckers and picked up shifts nobody else wanted. I gave Diane most of my paycheck for room and board. I was allowed to keep just enough to buy necessities she deemed frivolous extras, things such as the cheapest possible shampoo that didn't leave my hair feeling like straw, or notebooks for school that weren't from the dollar store. At night, I'd sometimes cry silently into my pillow. clutching the small framed photo of my parents I'd managed to save. It showed my mom's laughing face as Dad kissed her cheek at the beach last summer. I'd traced their faces with my finger, trying to remember exactly how Mom's perfume smelled, or the way Dad's eyes crinkled when he smiled. The memories were already fading, like photographs left too long in the sun. Jake would whisper apologies when his mother was particularly harsh, usually after she'd had her second glass of Chardonnay and her comments turned from passive-aggressive to just plain aggressive. "Mom's just stressed about money," he'd explain, his voice low as we sat on the back porch steps. "The mortgage is killing her since Dad left." His father had walked out 3 years earlier, trading Diane for his 20-something secretary and a condo in Florida. Jake rarely spoke to him now. "She's not always like this," he'd insist, squeezing my hand. "This house, it was supposed to be their forever home, and now she's struggling to keep it." I believed him. I believed all of it. The financial struggles, the grief over lost dreams, the stress of suddenly having another mouth to feed. I believed it because it was easier than acknowledging the alternative, that maybe Diane simply enjoyed having someone to control, someone whose desperation made them the perfect target. Until the day everything changed. It was a Tuesday in April, one of those perfect spring days that feels like a gift after a long winter. School had been weirdly good that day. I'd aced my calculus test, and Miss Rodriguez had asked me to stay after class to tell me my essay on Toni Morrison was one of the best she'd ever read. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of my old self, the girl who'd had plans and ambitions before grief swallowed them whole. Last period was canceled because Mr. Evans had a family emergency, so I headed home early, thinking I could get a head start on dinner. Maybe I'd make lasagna from scratch, Mom's recipe with the secret ingredient of a pinch of nutmeg in the sauce. It had been Dad's favorite. I hadn't cooked anything just for pleasure in so long. As I walked in, I heard Diane's voice coming from the kitchen, sharp and animated. "No, Adele has no idea," she was saying, followed by the clink of ice in a glass. "The insurance money is sitting pretty in an account she can't touch until she's 18, but as her legal guardian, I can make necessary withdrawals for her care." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Care that costs exactly the same as what I pay for my mortgage. By the time she figures it out, there won't be much left," she chuckled. My hand froze on the strap of my backpack. Insurance money? Legal guardian? I didn't know about any of this. "Of course it's legal, Sharon," Diane continued. "I've got all the paperwork. The judge barely looked at it. You know how these things go when a minor has no other family stepping up. Everyone just wants the problem solved." Another laugh. "And solved it is. This house will be paid off in no time, and little orphan Annie is none the wiser." The wooden floor creaked under my weight as I shifted backward, and I froze, heart hammering. But Diane didn't notice, too caught up in her conversation. "Listen, I've got to run. That ungrateful brat will be home soon, and I need to leave her another list of chores. God forbid she thinks she gets a free ride." There was a pause. "Drinks Friday? Perfect. My treat? Or should I say Adele's treat?" I backed away silently and left the house, my mind racing. My parents had never mentioned life insurance, but it made sense they would have had policies, especially with Dad's corporate job. And somehow, Diane had become my guardian without my knowledge or consent. I was so devastated after the funeral, I must have signed papers without understanding what they were. I remembered now, the stack of documents she'd slid across the kitchen table 2 days after the funeral, her voice gentle but insistent. "These are just formalities, Adele," she'd said, tapping a manicured nail against the signature line. "So, you can stay with us legally. We don't want social services getting involved, do we?" Social services. The boogeyman she'd conjured whenever I showed any resistance. The threat of being placed with strangers, shuttled through a system that didn't care about me. "Sign here, honey. It's what your parents would want." I'd signed without reading, tears blurring my vision, grief making it impossible to focus on anything but the crushing weight of my loss. What a perfect target I must have been, young, vulnerable, desperate for connection and stability. A memory surfaced, Dad sitting at our dining room table, organizing papers in his meticulous way. "Always read before you sign, Adele," he told me once, showing me my first bank account documents. "No matter who's asking, no matter how much you trust them, that's your signature, your responsibility." I'd failed him, failed myself. That night at dinner, I tried to act normal while my insides were churning. I watched Diane complain about her financial struggles while wearing a brand new watch that I hadn't noticed before. "Adele, you left streaks on the windows again," she snapped, interrupting my thoughts. and the floor in the entryway is still dirty. If you're going to live here, you need to pull your weight." "I'm sorry," I said automatically, the words feeling hollow in my mouth. "I'll redo them after dinner." "See that you do," she said, cutting into her steak, the expensive cut I'd bought with my cafe paycheck because she'd insisted on having it tonight. After dinner, while Diane watched her shows and Jake was doing homework, I snuck into her home office. My hands trembled as I searched through her filing cabinet. In the back of a drawer labeled Personal, I found a folder with my name on it. Inside were documents that made my stomach drop. Life insurance policies for both my parents, naming me as the beneficiary. The total payout was $257,000. There were also legal guardianship papers with Diane's signature and mine, though I had no memory of signing them. And then I found the bank statements. An account in my name with Diane listed as guardian showed regular withdrawals of $2,100, exactly her mortgage payment. In 8 months, she'd taken nearly $17,000. I took photos of everything with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I had to retake several shots. I carefully returned everything exactly as I'd found it and slipped out of the office. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed planning my next move. I needed help, but who could I turn to? My parents' friends had all been back in our old town, 2,000 miles away. The next day at school, I couldn't focus on anything. The words in my textbooks swam before my eyes, and I barely registered the concerned glances from classmates when I didn't raise my hand once during AP English, usually my favorite class. During lunch, I sat alone in the far corner of the cafeteria, picking at a sandwich I had no appetite for. Last period was American history with Miss Rodriguez. She'd always been kind to me, one of those rare teachers who seemed to genuinely care about her students beyond just their grades. After the accident, she'd given me extensions on assignments without making me feel like a charity case, and sometimes left books on my desk that she thought might help. Not cheesy self-help nonsense, but novels where characters faced loss and found their way through. When class ended, I lingered until the other students filed out, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Miss Rodriguez?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Could I talk to you about something? It's important." She looked up from her desk, her dark eyes immediately registering my distress. "Of course, Adele. Close the door." I sank into a chair across from her desk, my hands trembling as I pulled out my phone. The words spilled out of me in a jumbled rush. Diane's phone conversation, the guardianship I didn't remember agreeing to, the insurance money being drained away. Miss Rodriguez's expression grew increasingly concerned as I showed her the photos I'd taken of the documents in Diane's office. "Slow down, breathe," she said gently, passing me a tissue I hadn't realized I needed until I felt the wetness on my cheeks. "You did the right thing coming to me." She studied the photos carefully, her brow furrowing as she swiped through them. "Adele, this is financial abuse and potentially fraud," she said quietly. "You need legal help. I have a brother who's an attorney. Will you let me call him?" I nodded, hope flickering for the first time, but said, "I have no money. How will I pay him?" And she just smiled like my mom used to do when I asked something absurd. That's when I knew things were going to be okay. That afternoon, instead of going home, I met with Michael, Miss Rodriguez's brother, at his law office. He reviewed the documents on my phone and asked me detailed questions about how I came to live with Diane and what I remembered about the guardianship process. "This is extremely concerning," he said finally. "It appears she's taking advantage of a minor in a vulnerable position. The good news is that we can challenge the guardianship and freeze that account immediately." "What will happen to me?" I asked, suddenly terrified of having nowhere to go. Michael explained that at 17 I had options. We could petition for emancipation, find another guardian, or potentially place me in supervised independent living until I turned 18, which was only 5 months away. "First things first," he said. "We need to protect your assets and gather more evidence. Don't let Diane know you're onto her yet." For the next week, I played my part perfectly. I cleaned the house, cooked the meals, and acted completely normal while Michael worked behind the scenes. He filed emergency petitions with the court and arranged for a hearing. I also photocopied all the documents in Diane's folder and lodged them with Mrs. Rodriguez. But 3 days before the hearing, everything fell apart. Diane was going through my backpack, something she did regularly to, as she explained it, make sure I wasn't getting into trouble. When she found a business card from Michael's law office that I had forgotten to remove, and a printed card listing contact numbers for youth in need of help, her face contorted with rage. "What is this?" she demanded, waving the card in my face. "Why are you meeting with a lawyer?" I needed advice about something for school," I stammered, but she wasn't buying it. "Rodriguez," she read from the card, her eyes flashing. "Isn't that your history teacher's name? What have you been telling people? What lies have you been spreading?" "They're not lies," I said, finding my courage. "I know about the insurance money, Diane. I know what you've been doing." The color drained from her face, replaced almost instantly by a dark flush of anger. "You ungrateful little bitch," she hissed, grabbing my arm so tightly I knew it would leave marks. "After everything we've done for you, taking you in when nobody wanted you, feeding you, clothing you, giving you a home when you had nothing." "Let go of me," I said, trying to pull away. Her nails dug deeper. "You think you can accuse me after I've sacrificed everything? Do you have any idea what it costs to keep a roof over your head, to feed another mouth? Your precious parents left you with nothing but problems." The mention of my parents ignited something in me. "Don't you dare talk about them. They'd be disgusted by what you've done, stealing from their daughter, treating me like a servant." The front door opened and Jake walked in, stopping short at the scene before him. "Mom? Adele? What's going on?" "Your girlfriend here is secretly meeting with lawyers," she spat, finally releasing my arm to wave the business card at him. "Planning something behind our backs after all we've done, spreading lies about me to her teachers, conspiring against this family." I looked at Jake, pleading silently for him to understand, to remember the girl he'd met that first day of school, before grief and his mother had twisted everything between us. But his eyes hardened as Diane continued her tirade, painting me as a conniving, ungrateful charity case who was trying to destroy their family. "She claims I've been stealing from her," Diane said, her voice breaking with manufactured emotion. "After all the money I've spent on her, all the bills I've paid, the food I've bought, the clothes on her back." "Is this true, Adele?" Jake asked, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. He'd moved to stand beside his mother, a united front against me. "It's not what you think," I started, desperate to make him understand. "There's insurance money from my parents, Jake. Money meant for me that she's been taking for the mortgage, for her shopping, for..." "For what?" he interrupted. "For the roof over your head? For your ungrateful ass to have somewhere to live instead of being shipped off to foster care with strangers?" His words cut through me like a knife. The boy who'd once held my hand through my parents' funeral was now looking at me like I was something distasteful he'd found on the bottom of his shoe. "You don't understand," I tried again. "She lied to me. She..." "Get out," Diane said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Pack your things and get out of my house right now. Diane, please. Now!" she screamed, her composure shattering. "You want to sue me? You want to accuse me of theft? Then you don't get to live under my roof for one more minute." Jake just stood there saying nothing as I ran to my room and stuffed what else I could into my backpack. Some clothes, my school notebooks, the small box of keepsakes from my former life. The photo album I'd been compiling wouldn't fit. Neither would the quilt my grandmother had made that was one of the few things saved from my parents' house. I'd have to leave them behind. When I came back out, the front door was open, and Diane was holding my coat, her face a mask of righteous indignation. "You'll regret this," she said as she practically pushed me outside into the gathering storm clouds. "Nobody crosses me and gets away with it." The door slammed behind me, followed by the decisive click of the deadbolt. Through the front window, I could see Jake watching, his expression unreadable before he turned away, disappearing into the depths of the house. That's how I ended up standing in the rain, homeless at 17, with just a backpack and $43 to my name. I called Michael immediately, my voice breaking as I explained what had happened. "Stay where you are," he said firmly. "I'm coming to get you." 40 minutes later, I was sitting in Michael's spare bedroom, wrapped in a blanket with a mug of hot chocolate, as he and Miss Rodriguez discussed options. "We have the emergency hearing in 3 days," Michael said. "Until then, you can stay here. I've already filed a report about Diane kicking you out. That only strengthens our case." The next morning, Michael took me to the bank where my account was held. With the legal paperwork he'd prepared, we were able to freeze the account pending the court hearing. The bank manager's eyes widened when she saw the pattern of withdrawals. "This doesn't look right at all," she murmured, typing notes into her computer. "We'll cooperate fully with the court." Over the next 2 days, we gathered more evidence. Michael subpoenaed all of Diane's financial records. We discovered she'd been doing more than just taking my insurance money for the mortgage. She'd been shopping, paying off credit cards, and even took a weekend trip to Las Vegas, all funded by my parents' insurance payout. The day of the hearing arrived. I wore a conservative blue dress that Miss Rodriguez had bought for me, my hands trembling as we entered the courthouse. Diane was already there with her attorney, looking polished and maternal in a modest floral dress. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed, but she quickly composed her face into a mask of concern. She tried to approach me, but Michael stepped between us. "Save it for the judge," he said quietly. The hearing was intense. Diane's attorney painted her as a selfless woman who had taken in her son's orphaned girlfriend out of the goodness of her heart. According to them, she had every right to use the insurance money for household expenses since she was providing me with food and shelter. Miss Garner has sacrificed her privacy, her space, and her financial stability to care for this young woman, her lawyer argued. The withdrawals were reasonable compensation for these sacrifices. When it was our turn, Michael methodically presented the evidence. Bank statements showing withdrawals that far exceeded any reasonable expenses for my care, receipts for luxury purchases, and the fact that I had been working and contributing to household expenses while Diane was draining my account. "Your Honor," Michael said, his voice clear and measured, "what we have here is a clear case of financial exploitation of a minor. Miss Garner established guardianship over Adele without providing proper counseling or ensuring she understood what she was signing. A clear ethical breach, if not a legal one." He displayed a spreadsheet on the courtroom monitor, color-coded to show different categories of expenses. As you can see, there were withdrawals for a weekend spa trip to Sedona, $1,782, a designer handbag purchase from Nordstrom, $1,250, monthly wine club membership, $189 per month. None of these expenses benefited Adele, and more to the point, none of these memberships, holidays payments, or purchases became regular expenses until Diane gained control of Adele's finances. I testified last, my voice gaining strength as I spoke. "I was grateful to have somewhere to go after my parents died," I said, looking directly at the judge. "I worked hard to contribute to the household. I cooked, cleaned, and gave Diane money from my cafe job. I didn't know about the insurance money until I overheard her bragging about taking it." The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, asked me questions about my living situation, school performance, and plans for the future. "And what do you want to happen now?" she asked finally. I took a deep breath. "I want my parents' money to go toward my college education, like they would have wanted. I want to be emancipated so I can make my own decisions, and I want Diane to return the money she took under false pretenses." The judge nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Diane. "Miss Garner, did you inform Adele about the insurance policies or discuss how those funds would be used?" Diane squirmed in her seat. I didn't want to burden her with financial matters while she was grieving." "That's not what I asked," the judge said sharply. "Did you inform her about her inheritance or how you planned to use it? Did you tell Adele that her money was being used to pay off your mortgage?" "No, Your Honor," Diane admitted reluctantly. The judge's expression hardened. "I find that Miss Garner has breached her fiduciary duty as guardian. I am terminating the guardianship immediately. The remaining insurance funds are to be placed in a trust for Adele's benefit, with the court appointing a professional trustee." I held my breath as she continued. "Furthermore, Miss Garner is ordered to repay all funds withdrawn from the account, minus reasonable expenses for Adele's direct care, which I am setting at $600 per month. Based on the evidence presented, that means you owe approximately $12,200 to be repaid within 90 days. Diane gasped. "That's impossible! I don't have that kind of money." The judge's gaze was unsympathetic. "Then you should not have spent money that wasn't yours. You may work out a payment plan with the court, but payment will be made." She turned to me. "As for the petition for emancipation, I am granting it. However, I want monthly check-ins with a court-appointed social worker until you turn 18, just to ensure you have the support you need." When the gavel came down, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Diane confronted me, her face twisted with anger. "You've ruined everything," she hissed. "You've turned my son against me, embarrassed me in front of everyone." "You did that yourself," I replied calmly. "All I did was tell the truth." "Mom, that's enough," came a voice from behind her. Jake stood there, his expression conflicted. He had slipped into the back of the courtroom during the hearing. "You heard all that?" I asked him. He nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "I had no idea about the money, I swear, Adele." "It doesn't matter now," I said, surprised at how little his opinion mattered to me anymore. I've got to go start my life. With Michael and Miss Rodriguez beside me, I walked away without looking back. 3 months later, I graduated high school with honors and a full scholarship to State University. Diane had been making her court-ordered repayments, selling her designer handbags and jewelry to meet the deadline. I heard through mutual friends that she had to take a second job to keep up with her mortgage without my insurance money to pay it. The day I moved into my college dorm, I received a text from Jake. "I'm sorry for everything. Can we talk?" I looked around at my new room, my new beginning, and replied, "I've moved on. I suggest you do the same." When I think back to that terrified girl standing in the rain, I barely recognize her. Sometimes life's hardest moments force you to discover strengths you never knew you had. My parents would have been proud of how I stood up for myself. The insurance money they left behind did more than just fund my education. It taught me the invaluable lesson that I am strong enough to fight for what's rightfully mine. No one will ever take advantage of me again.